Alright, I'm going to have a quick little video here on how I mount counters. It's nothing too brilliant of an idea of how to do it, but it's what I use, the method I use, and it works for me. For this, you'll need a few items, of course. What I did, I'm mounting some counters for Gunslinger. These are alternate counters that I created, some more informational markers, that kind of stuff. I went to FedEx and printed on cardstock, matte finish. My printer, my laser printer, unfortunately will not feed this cardstock, so I have to go there to do it. You could just print it on regular paper, and I think you would be just fine. I like the matte finish. You could do photo paper if you want a semi-gloss type finish. For the cardstock, I got this at either Michael's or Hobby Lobby. It's a $2.50 sheet, a printing board, I guess it says. Not too thick. I do have thicker board, and I actually had made these counters just last night, and I used a different cardboard, and they came out thick. They are like Yaquinto on steroids thick. They're so thick they will not go into my corner rounder, and that kind of annoys me because I like round corners. So I'm going to redo it, and I'm going to do it on this cardstock. Also, you're going to need metal ruler for cutting. I like it with the little cork backing here, keeps it from sliding. Whatever method works for you. With in regards to a ruler, some use like clear acrylic, thick sheet of acrylic. That would work as well. I got one of these cutting mats, which is great. And then I've got one of these circular cutters. This is a Martelli Ergo 2000. Amazon has them for $14.44, I think. You could use a traditional roller, rotary cutter. This one, the idea is you guide it with your finger, and I tend to get straighter cuts with it, and it's a little easier on my wrist. Alright, so we're going to move to the first step. Alright, so the artboard is got nice perfect 90-degree angles, which we're going to rely upon. If you've already cut out pieces, you're going to have to use a T-square or something to get a perfectly square corner again. But the idea is you're going to work off of the four corners so that you always have at least one perfectly square corner to work off of. We're going to trim this guy up. Basically, I'm going to get my sheet. I'm not going to go perfectly into the corner, but I'm going to go pretty dang close. And I'm going to trim it just a little bit on the outside so I have a little bit of area to play with. Just out of curiosity, so yeah, wouldn't quite do two sheets that way. So this artboard's gonna get maybe one, two, it looks like two full sets of counters with lots of wiggle room. Maybe a half sheet if you went like this. You might be able to get a half sheet. Yeah, you could do, oh, here we go. So you could do one like that, and then you got here for at least a good half sheet and a little bit more. All right, so we're gonna trim this up. You don't need to see that on video. I'll come right back. Okay, so I've trimmed the piece that I'm going to be working with. It is going to be just a little bit wider than my counter sheet. It's pretty dang close. I got a little bit of play on each side, a little bit more up there. But that's all we need, because we're going to work off of this corner right here. This is going to be our alignment. Now, I know some methods use registration marks, which basically would be a couple of dots here, and you would use like a hole punch, and the board, you would place this on a board that had two pegs, and then you would lay your counter sheet after you've glued it through the registration marks onto pegs that would then position it onto the cardboard, and you'd flip it over and do the other side with the same registration marks. I'm thinking of making a little device that will do that. I didn't really leave enough room for registration marks on this particular counter sheet. I guess you could do it in the center, but that's something to think about if you think if this little method doesn't work for you. This has worked for me. I've done probably 1,000 counters now with this method. So registration marks is a cool idea. Again, I'm going to look into that, but for right now we're going to go with this method. All right, we're going to move into the garage because I don't want to spray glue in here. All right, one more accessory you're going to need is a spray adhesive. I like this Krylon high strength spray adhesive. Michaels, Hobby Lobby, or the such will have it. I don't remember what it went for, maybe $5-6, something in that area, maybe $10, I don't know. Basically, just need to spray and apply it to the front side. We're going to mount the counters on that, let it dry for a second or two. We'll flip it over and do the other side. Well, I say a second, a couple minutes actually. I like to spray and then I like to let it semi-dry, maybe less than 5 minutes. Just a semi-dry. I don't want it too wet and sticky, just enough to where it's not runny. And it really doesn't come out runny when you use a spray adhesive, unlike rubber cement. I did for the carrier, I did use my carrier reprint, I did use rubber cement, and it worked. Those counters are fine, but when I smoothed it out, and we'll go through that process here shortly, rubber cement was running out the ends, and it kind of turned into a mess. The spray adhesive works so much better, and if I'm going to make another set of carrier counters, I'm definitely going to use the spray adhesive. Alright, so we're going to spray, and I'm going to see if I can do this while on camera. But nothing too fancy. Oh, that's great. Yeah, test spray first. That's it. Just a quick coat. And like I said, I like to sit here and let it this kind of stuff, like to let it dry a little bit. And then we're going to pick it up and move to the second step here. Here's my super secret. I have this wooden tray that I got probably at Goodwill. I did get at Goodwill. I'm not going to lie, I shop Goodwill. It's got a nice 90-degree edge. And what I do is I position my cardboard and I make sure that I have two edges that are 90 degrees, because if you trimmed it like we did earlier in the first step, this isn't quite 90, but I found these two edges are. So basically I use this for alignment, and I'm going to place my sheet in here and stick it down. And I've applied it, and we got a nice fit in the corner. This is the front of my counter sheet. Next, we're going to move on to the back side, and you just basically repeat that process. You're going to have to make sure that you align your fronts and your backs properly. So if I stick this side, if I stick this corner up in here, you can see we're not going to align properly. So we're going to have to rely on this corner. Alright, we've just stuck down the second side. So here we have double counter sheet. And we're going to move inside and do a little pressing. Alright, I didn't do too good of a job laying out all my tools that are needed before I started filming, but I got a little roller, again, hobby craft store, a couple bucks, and obviously we're going to roll and smooth this out, get out any bumps, wrinkles, air bubbles, etc. Okay, it's all rolled out, it's pressed, didn't have any air bubbles, really. But we got a nice tight fit. Counter sheet is mounted front and back. And next step would be simply to lay down your metal ruler and start cutting. When I cut, what I found is I don't go over the line, and it's going to take multiple presses. It's not a one swipe and you get a nice clean cut generally. This Martelli does cut better than another rotary cutter that I have, but it's going to take multiple passes each time, so it gets a little tedious. But what I found is I make my straight line using the ruler. I then pull the ruler away. I have a nice guide, and I just position in that guide and I just slowly work up and down. I don't do this motion. I go always away from me until I get a clean cut and separation. And that's it. Pretty simple process. Cutting them out does take a little bit of time. Take some practice with the rotary cutter if you haven't used one before. The cool thing about PDFs is if you boo-boo a row of counters and it's just hopeless with those, you can always print you another sheet and mount you another row of counters or the whole counter sheet again. So that's how I do it, and I'll cut these out or start to cut them out, maybe do one more wrap-up video on this. So after waiting about 20 minutes or so, let the glue dry. It dries very quickly. I started to cut out some strips. Basically cut one half section off, trimmed around the corners or around the sides, two of the sides, and then I start cutting my strips. It's nothing more than laying your ruler right on that line, then using your rotary cutter and pushing away from yourself. I get, like I said before, I get that nice first deep cut. I press fairly firmly on that initial cut. Being careful, the thing that happens most is the ruler slips and then these end counters get nipped one way or the other. But I do a fairly firm press, say that 5 times real fast, on that initial cut. Then I pull the ruler away and I put my rotary cutter in that groove that I just made, and a much lighter scroll 2 or 3 more times until it separates away and you get a strip of counters like this. Then cutting the individuals, I put the ruler on there and I go back and forth because it's such a short cut, and for some reason these shorter cuts, it separates really quickly. So once you've got your strips cut out, you can separate the individual counters really quickly. And then once all is said and done, you can round them or whatever you need to do. And I've got a counter here. Looks almost like a real counter. Double-sided. Round corners. Thickness. Yeah. Definitely playable. Hope this helps you. Thanks a lot.